Yo, brothers, sisters, and friends. Welcome to the Fight Like Hell podcast. This is the official podcast of the National Association of Letter Carriers, the union that represents 290,000 active and retired city letter carriers employed by the United States Postal Service. I'm Ed Morgan, and I'm here with our national president, Brian Renfro. Hey, Brian, how are you?
Hey, Eddie. Doing great, man. Doing great. Glad to be back on.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot to talk about. Let's get right into it. First, let's start with the Fight Like Hell moniker. Why did we get this rebranding? And what does Fight Like Hell mean? And where does it come from?
Yeah, this campaign that we kicked off a couple of weeks ago, we branded it, as you said, Fight Like Hell, including this podcast, and really comes from a mantra from a great labor leader in history, Mother Jones, that was an activist, really a legend in the labor movement for the mine workers in the early 1900s, has a very famous quote that has been repeated a million times, but I think it's still applicable today. And her quote was, "Mourn the dead and pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living." So as we go into 2025, there's a very changed landscape in front of us. And the challenges that we face are different than the challenges that we faced in a number of years, which we'll get into. And Fight Like Hell is just a campaign that involves a lot of different moving parts. But it's really designed just to give all of our members, something to rally behind. I mean, whatever battle we fight, whether that's collective bargaining, that's things to do with our safety, that's legislative achievements that we prioritize, like the Federal Retirement Fairness Act that would allow former non-career employees to get that time credited, or a tax on us, whether that comes from Capitol Hill or the administration or anywhere else. It's a campaign that's well underway, and we're excited about what we can do within the campaign to really give our members the opportunity to do what they do best, and that is stand up together in solidarity as a union to achieve the things that we want to achieve and to fight off those attacks that are surely going to come, as we've seen in the last week or so.
All right, let's talk about collective bargaining, the tentative agreement, and everything that's gone down. The tentative agreement went to membership for a vote, and it was voted down. What do you want to say about that?
Yeah, so just maybe I'll explain what the process is, and this is all rooted in the NLC Constitution and Article 16. But the first thing is that the result of a ratification vote, whether it's this year or in years past, whether that's to reject an agreement or accept an agreement, is I think a shining example of one of the strengths of our union, that we are the most democratic, little d democratic union in America. And what happened here is after, a long period of collective bargaining where, we stretched the Postal Service as far as they would go and got the most economically that we could potentially get in a tentative agreement. We then utilized that process in our Constitution. We sent it out for ratification on January 31st. The ballot committee that I appointed certified the results of that. The results were to reject the agreement. So, basically what it comes down to is the most the Postal Service was willing to put on the table is not enough, and that letter carriers simply deserve more pay. So following the certification of that vote, the Constitution in Article 16 provides for reopening negotiations, which we immediately requested. The Postal Service did that, and we have moved forward through that process, which I know we're going to get into a little deeper detail on. But the tentative agreement that was the most they would put on the table was sent out to our members to make that decision, and our active members that voted made that decision. So we continue to engage in the process that our Constitution provides.
Okay, after the vote count went down, what was our next move?
Yeah, so immediately once we got that information, the certified result from the ballot committee, the first thing I did was contact our attorneys and professionals here that have been preparing for interest arbitration going really all the way back to 2022, and just let them know this was the outcome. So it's, at this point, at least a reasonably strong possibility we may end up in interest arbitration, to get them working immediately on, to some degree, dusting off the prep that hadn't been done and that type thing. Then talk to the Postal Service to inform them of the result and, request to immediately reopen negotiations per our Constitution, which they agreed to do. We then met with the Executive Council and, informed the NLC Executive Council of the result and talked a little bit about the process going forward, what the Constitution provides for. And then, we posted on the website just really very shortly after it was certified that afternoon what the outcome was. Started a couple other things in motion, on that same day too, just knowing that we would have a very abbreviated period of negotiations due to the time limit in the Constitution in front of us. We did some surveys and some polling. I know a number of you listening probably participated in that. I don't know that it told us anything we didn't know, but it certainly confirmed that, what is most important to our members is pay. And that was just another useful piece of information that was discussed, with the council throughout this process to help guide us. So all that happened on Friday, January 31st. And then the following Monday, we immediately reopened negotiations with the Postal Service.
And our NALC Constitution calls for 15 days of negotiations. What does that look like?
Yeah, so it limits that period if it's reopened to 15 days. So we did that. We bargained, essentially every day over that 15-day period, focused primarily on the economic issues and attempting to reach a potential tentative agreement, a modified tentative agreement that per the Constitution to send out to the members for a second ratification vote. Over the course of that 15 days, there was some progress made in terms of kind of the overall economic benefit. Some of the details, of course, on a day-to-day basis, we go back and forth on the details. And the idea was just to see, once again, how far the Postal Service would be willing to go and what they were willing to pay. That period concluded on what I believe was Tuesday, February the 18th. And then we had, at that point in time, scheduled an executive council meeting for Tuesday, February 19th to discuss where we were at the conclusion of that 15-day period.
What did that executive council meeting sound and look like?
Yeah, so the meeting was just to tell them here's where we are. We did not have an agreement with the Post Service at the time. It was mostly about explaining to the council what after that 15 days, I was pretty sure that the Post Service would be willing to agree to. And ultimately, the discussion among the council is with where we are and what they are willing to do at this point. Is that enough for us to wrap this into a modified tentative agreement and send out to the members for a second ratification vote, which the Constitution provides for? That after the conclusion of that 15 days, if there's an agreement, we would send it out for a second vote. And the consensus of the council in a unanimous vote was that at that point in time on that Wednesday, that even though there was, some progress made in terms of them being willing to spend a little more money and an increased economic package for us, that it was not in our interest to wrap that up into a tentative agreement and to declare impasse and move to the interest arbitration process, which we did.
And then the timeline of that, we started to hear or see some talk about executive orders. Can you just walk us through the timeline of when you had that first meeting after the 15 days and what happened over that, the end of the weekend area?
Yeah, this was a crazy week. We the last day of that 15 days was on Tuesday the 18th. On Wednesday the 19th, we met with the council as I just described, and then of course decided to declare impasse. Notified the members of that on the website. Obviously notified the Postal Service, and that next day immediately began developing what the interest arbitration process would look like and, reaching out to the arbitrator for dates and talking with the Postal Service about, how many dates we would need and what we needed to solicit and, all those types of things. And then late Thursday afternoon, we became aware of what really was sort of a bombshell. And that was that this administration intended to issue an executive order to eliminate the Board of Governors, to abolish the Postal Regulatory Commission, to remove the leadership at the Postal Service, and to transfer the Postal Service from its status as an independent federal agency that it's been since 1970 under the control of the Commerce Department. And this is concerning for a whole lot of reasons. Primarily, number one, it's illegal that the 1970 Postal Reorganization Act that was one of the results of the strike that was led by, began with letter carriers in Branch 36 in New York City and was led by Vince Sombrato, NALC's greatest president. This law created the Postal Service in its form it exists today. It also gave us full collective bargaining rights. So we had to move very quickly, starting Thursday. Once we became aware of this, there was a news report later that night that was consistent with what we had heard kind of within the postal community here, and that is a fight that's ongoing right now. And of course, something like that would potentially change in a lot of ways, not just the landscape of bargaining, but the challenges that we may face. So we have to immediately at that point start looking towards all the possibilities, and if this executive order is filed and then there's legal action, which we would surely participate in to stop it immediately. But even if it stopped immediately, then what do things look like? It's perfectly reasonable to assume that depending on the timing of such a change and who's in leadership at the Postal Service at any point in time, that we would anticipate things like attacks on our collective bargaining. We have to be prepared for all of that stuff. And what you want to do is immediately assess that and just ensure that we as a union are in the strongest possible position to defend our members' rights, whether that's our fundamental right to collective bargaining or something more detailed. So that has kind of been what has happened over the last roughly week plus. But it, of course, had an impact on collective bargaining. So the executive council then got together, as soon as we heard this news, we scheduled a council meeting later that night. We actually started the meeting pretty shortly after the news broke in the Washington Post, and just discussed all those things that I just talked about in detail. And the council made the decision by an overwhelming vote at that point to do everything we could to make this interest arbitration process happen as quickly as possible. And I know we'll probably get a little deeper into what that process will look like. But in a nutshell, even if that means using partial days and weekends and things that we had not previously planned to do, that we should go that direction. So that was a decision the council made, and then I immediately reached out to the Postal Service, and we started working on what that process would look like.
Before we get into, the political side and what's at stake and what we're going to need to do, let's turn it back towards the arbitration. And for our members out there that have never been through an interest arbitration or really even a rights arbitration, can you explain the difference between rights arbitration and interest arbitration?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think this is very important to understand. So, what's referred to generally as rights arbitration is the type of arbitration that we utilize to resolve grievances at the final step. At the local level, when a local grievance is filed in a particular work location, we have a series of steps: informal step A, formal step A, step B. If step B is not able to resolve the grievance, it is impassed and sent to our national business agent, who can appeal it to arbitration. That rights arbitration with local grievances that most of our listeners would be familiar with. There are two types of arbitration that we utilize. One is just standard rights arbitration, where you have an arbitrator, both sides come in and put on their case, call witnesses, etc. And then you have what we call expedited arbitration, which is just a faster process. It does not involve the both parties, or one party or the other can request to write a brief, which is sort of a written conclusion or closing of a case that they would send in. It's just designed to be faster. And there's an MOU in our contract that has certain topics that utilize that expedited arbitration process. One thing to note there is there are certain topics that are covered by that expedited arbitration process, but either party retains the right to move it up to the regular rights arbitration process. Also, at the headquarters level, we have national level grievances sometimes about matters of interpretation of our contract that utilize rights arbitration. The difference in rights arbitration and interest arbitration is that rights arbitration are about something that took place, or each party having a particular position over an interpretation of enforcement of or compliance with existing contractual language. Interest arbitration in our world is a process where we utilize an arbitration process to determine or set the actual terms of an agreement. We utilize that at the local level every few years when we negotiate local memorandums of understanding between the Postal Service at the local level and our local branches. And we utilize that at the national level when we are unable to come to an agreement on the terms of a collective bargaining agreement. And this is something that's provided for in the law. I think a really important piece to talk about here as well with interest arbitration is the 1970 Post Reorganization Act that gives us the collective bargaining rights and process that we have. In a nutshell, basically says that if the parties are unable to come to an agreement on a collective bargaining agreement, that they develop a process to resolve that dispute. Interest arbitration, in its sort of traditional form in the law, is essentially a default if they are unable to agree on what that process would look like. And if you look through our history of interest arbitration, you will see multiple variations of the process. And that is because of what that law provides, that at each time we have utilized the interest arbitration process, we have to some degree negotiated with the Postal Service what that process would look like. There have been times where 1978, we used something that's sort of a hybrid of mediation and arbitration. I know firsthand in the 2011 round of bargaining, which the arbitration process took place in 2012, all the testimony was submitted in written format. So there's a lot of the law basically envisioned the parties developing a process. So everything that anyone may know about rights arbitration, regular panel versus expedited, put that out of, we got to eliminate that from the thought because these are two totally different things. Interest arbitration is about setting the terms of an agreement, and the law provides for us to develop the process, which at this point we have done.
So with interest arbitration, is everything in our contract on the table?
Hypothetically, it could be. But if you look at whether it's the tentative agreement that was sent out for ratification or, any of our collective bargaining agreements, really going all the way back to, the modern era, beginning in 1970, the changes that are part of any agreement are a relatively very small percentage of the contract. So not small in terms of importance, because obviously the things like our pay and benefits, the economic stuff, and then some work rule type issues that affect us every single day are important. But in terms of like the number of contractual provisions we change is a super, super low percentage of the overall, the document is several hundred pages. So part of the process that we are going to utilize here, and really what has driven the different processes that we've utilized over the years, is to balance getting this done as quickly as we can while still giving, each side the opportunity to present whatever case that they want to present to the arbitrator to support their issues, but also it incorporates a mediation piece. And that mediation piece just allows more quickly for the neutral arbitrator to get a clear understanding of the issues that both sides are putting forward. So, typically over our history, it has been the economic issues that go before the arbitrator, and that will be no different this time. Those will be the priority because, those very clearly are the most important issues.
Can you explain this process of the expedited arbitration?
Yeah, and I think maybe we should use a word other than expedite. It's almost accelerated is a better word, just to avoid that confusion of rights versus interest arbitration. But essentially what this is going to involve is very similar to what was done in 1978. There will be a mediation component to it where each side, has the opportunity to ensure that the arbitrator completely understands their positions. The arbitrator will then get both sides together. That tends to, narrow the issues and make clear what the issues are that are in front of the arbitrator. And then both sides will have the opportunity to put on whatever additional evidence that we want to put on. And ultimately, in this process, arbitrator Nolan, will serve as the arbitrator and will issue an award. So the mediation component allows in this process for the arbitrator to more quickly gain and a clear understanding of the primary issues, which once again, the primary issues for us are pay. And I, certainly don't want to speak for them, but I suspect that that'll be the same with the Postal Service.
I know you spoke about this in a few of your answers here, but I just want to, I know it's like been a point of contention. So can you fully explain why we're focusing on the economics and not the work rules?
Yeah, it's not that we don't focus on the work rules. I mean, those are very important. We spend a ton of time throughout the collective bargaining process on them. It's just that what you want to put in front of the arbitrator, what you don't want to put in front of the arbitrator. And the economic stuff is the most important. That is very clear. Anyone listening to this, I suppose there might be someone out there that, would say, I would rather have this changed to Article 25 than more pay, but I think that would be by far the exception. But the way this has worked in every round of interest arbitration we've done in years past, the way it'll work this time is the economic issues where we do not have agreement, or the issues that we put in front of the arbitrator. The work rules stuff, we will use a process that we have not done yet because the focus has been on developing this process. But we'll go through the stuff from the tentative agreement, and there may be things that either side wants to modify, either side wants to remove, either side wants to change. And then in the end, we will see, where we are, and likely submit whatever it is we can agree on to the arbitrator to include in, the arbitrator's award. That's what's happened in every round of interest arbitration in years past. The one thing that is a possibility, and this has happened in years past, is there are work rule issues that could potentially be placed in front of the arbitrator to make a decision. But what national level arbitrators do when work rule issues are placed in front of them is they have almost without exception ruled, the parties need to go negotiate this, not been willing to dive into setting specific work rule terms. And there's also arbitrators by nature, particularly those at the national level, are creatures that seek to find common ground. They seek to, reach a decision that satisfies to the extent possible as much as they can that both parties are requesting. So you have to be very careful in terms of strategy of what your priorities are and what you actually put in front of an arbitrator to decide. For example, if we laid out a whole bunch of work rule issues and the arbitrator just decided, okay, union, I'll give you those, but I'm not going to give you this economic piece over here, that obviously would be inconsistent with what our priorities are. So there is sort of a strategy element to it.
I know our members want to hear about the route inspection language. There's a feeling out there that we're giving up a reduction in office time. Can you go into that for us?
Yeah, well, first off, there is zero reduction in office time. There is the MOU that was included in the tentative agreement does not change anyone's office time. End of story, period. It is an agreement that recognizes that in joint route adjustment processes in the future, we would seek to use a different way to evaluate office time, and that certain components of office time would be recorded differently, and it establishes minimum times for those line items. I want to be as clear as I can possibly be about this. That agreement does not modify anyone's office time, evaluated office time. It does not modify projections that management uses to beat us over the head with and we file grievances on. It does not modify anything that the Post Service could do in a route adjustment on their own. That is simply not true. It is really about just modernizing that. If we get into a joint process in the future, we have an office, a commitment here, and bare minimums that the office evaluation method. So if you're a carrier out there and it's a joint process and you got a union rep and a management rep, they're evaluating your route, that we figure out what that office time is. And the vast majority of time, that's going to be your average time. So this is about, constructing the standard that's used solely for evaluation purposes. So just to, sum it up, that MOU that was in the TA, and I say this without any, I mean, it may or may not be in the interest arbitration award. I don't know. That's part of the process we have to go through. But it does not change anyone's office time, period. End of story. Any claim otherwise is simply false.
So another work rule language, like the 1260 language that was in the TA, where did that come
Hmm. Primarily from NALC's official bargaining positions at national conventions. And look, what we did here is struck a bargain that would address what has become an increasing problem for us out in the field, and that is the Postal Service mandating our people to work beyond 12 hours in a day, 60 hours in a week, the quote maximum work hour limits. And the history of this is, national arbitrator Mittenthal said a long time ago, decades ago, that work hour limitations are absolute. And then, for better or worse, there's been a long line of arbitration decisions since that said, no, they're not absolute, basically. What this language does is there are three primary changes. And I want to stress these are the only changes to Article 8 as it relates to maximum work hours. Number one, when someone reaches their maximum work hours as a full-time employee, regardless of what list they are on, what list they are not on, if they reach maximum work hours, they can clock out and they can leave, and the contract will protect them from discipline. That does not alter in any way what Postal Service's obligation to provide auxiliary assistance before forcing someone not on the list to work overtime, someone on the work assignment list to work off their assignment. It does not alter the provisions of Article 8, Section 5F. It in no way alters anything else other than if, regardless of the reason why, they reach maximum work hours as a full-time employee, they clock out, they go home. Piece number two is those that are on the overtime desired list. If they wish to volunteer to work more than 12 in a day or 60 in a week, they can voluntarily do so. If they do not volunteer, they do not want to do it, then they clock out and go home, and they have contractual protection against discipline. The third piece is that if someone works beyond 12 hours in a day or 60 hours in a week, it doesn't matter why, a new pay rate is established that will pay them 2.5 times pay. So those are, as it relates to maximum work hours, the only changes that were included in the tentative agreement. And as I said, it comes from a combination of convention resolutions and the fact that out in the field, where we've had these maximum work hour violations over and over and over, and we file grievances, and ultimately what stops it and where we've been successful in some locations is requesting and being granted a remedy that someone can go home when they reach the maximum work hours. And that's exactly what this bargain was designed to do. And to be clear, I don't, just like the office time thing, Ed, that you ask about, I say that to describe it and be sure people understand it. I don't, at this point, I cannot say definitively whether that piece will or will not be included, ultimately in the collective bargaining agreement that comes from this interest arbitration process.
Speaking about this arbitration process, the excelled, as we're calling it, what will be the steps in this excelled arbitration?
Yeah, so the step that we are in right now as we record this on Thursday, February 27th, is getting as quickly as we can blocks of time from Arbitrator Nolan. One of the things we're asking him for is not just, typically we would ask for multiple days in a row, full days to have hearings, and we have asked for even, partial days or really any time to get the process started. The next step would be once we get those dates, then we will inform the membership of this is when it'll start. Typically, he's fairly responsive, so I would expect that we get a response from him fairly soon. And then, we'll move forward with the process that I described earlier, starting with that mediation step, which is designed to inform him, have him gain a good understanding of the issues just through a mediation process rather than, official presentations and that sort of stuff. And then it would move to, after his mediation discussions with both sides, then, we all get together and move forward with where either side wants to go in terms of further evidence and presentation to him. And then ultimately he would make a decision.
I know this is a loaded question, and I know this is where the soundbite's going to come from, but realistically, how long will it take to get a decision?
It's hard to tell. I don't. I can tell you that the way we designed this process, the discussions we've had with the Postal Service, what the executive council discussed, and there was a motion made, and as I said, overwhelmingly approved, is to get it done as quickly as possible. As we go through the process, that will, of course, be communicated to Arbitrator Nolan. But it is literally impossible for me to put a timeline on it. I mean, look, we want this to happen quickly for reasons we've already talked about, but rushing the individual is going to decide an outcome that affects hundreds of thousands of letter carriers might not be the best course of action. So we will get a better sense of that as we get the dates established, which we'll report, and as we get into the process, which hopefully begins here in the very near future.
Now that we tell the listeners about the arbitration process, can you explain, and you sort of did a little bit, but like, let's get a little bit more deeper into it. Why do we need to get this done so quickly?
Yeah, I just think I mean, generally it's in our interest to get it done as quickly as we can, because hopefully that outcome would involve retro payment and things like that. And letter carriers have not had a pay increase in a long time now. But specifically, as I think alluded to earlier, this threat, we should call it, from the administration to issue an executive order creates all sorts of possibilities that we have to consider and be prepared for, and we are prepared for. One of those is if such a move is made, of course, there would be, as I mentioned, immediate legal action, but it is perfectly reasonable to expect that should such a move be made and the Postal Service end up underneath the executive branch of the government, which the Department of Commerce is, that's under the president, that we would then see exactly what we've seen from this administration on our brothers and sisters that are federal employees represented by several other unions, and that is an attack on their collective bargaining rights. Either just absolute refusal to recognize them, to attempts to cancel a collective bargaining agreement. So as we, of course, in this short period of time here over the last week have anticipated every possible scenario that could come from that just to prepare legally, there are things that we have to do to ensure we are in the strongest possible legal position. Typically an attack like that would be, first step would be to go to the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB. Unfortunately, there is no functional NLRB. The administration fired a sitting board member who had been nominated and confirmed and had time left on her term. That there is legal action about that. It's illegal to do that. That legal action remains unresolved, and there's not enough board members to constitute a quorum. So that avenue is off the table. And when it comes to these collective bargaining fights, and in the event which, should these battles materialize, and we're doing everything in our power and fighting like hell to be sure they don't, we've got to be in the strongest position. And you are in a stronger position if you have a collective bargaining agreement in effect within its duration dates. And so that's a piece of this too. And the conversation that we had with the council and the approach we've taken is to get this done as quickly as we can for that reason, but also do it through a process that does not in any way sacrifice our ability to put on our best case to achieve the best outcome we could achieve through interest arbitration. So I think we feel good about where we are in that process here going forward.
Is there like an underlying force, like talking to the administration, trying to push these executive orders or, doing these things to us?
Yeah, there absolutely is. Private business that wants to make money, that wants to take what we do that is profitable to them to make themselves richer. I mean, look, the president was asked about this on Friday, and he talked about a merger with the private sector. And let me just tell you what that means. What that means is the UPSs and the FedEx and the Amazons of the world, any other delivery service that may pop up, what they want to do is take the portions of our work that are profitable. They're not going to be interested in taking delivering to rural areas and the universal service that we provide. And that's really what's behind this. I mean, it's 100%. It is about taking what the Postal Service does well and what the Postal Service does is profitable and letting them make more money off of it. So, you know, look, a lot of the things that we fight on Capitol Hill and throughout the government with the Postal Service is comes from the private shippers. I mean, the private companies that do parcel shipping and delivery have an interest in the Postal Service failing. They don't care about all the people we deliver to. What they care about is getting the packages and making money. But it's also true that the Postal Service, we deliver 376 million pieces a day. We deliver tens of billions of packages every year, 70 to 80 billion packages. We deliver to 169 million delivery points every day. These companies do not have an interest in doing that. They have an interest in making a profit, as any private business should. That's the whole reason why private business exists. And I think that's the important distinction, between us as a public service and a private business. And I've gotten a lot of questions that, from our members about what if this was done, maybe they could make the post service more efficient, or maybe they could get rid of some of the management that's not needed, and maybe we would be okay. I just want to be as crystal clear as I can. If a significant amount of the package business that we do is given away, sold off to the private sector, the universal service that we provide is going to go away. That is what would be the obvious next step. So this is not about making the Postal Service more efficient. It is 100% about private shippers getting what they want in terms of our business and not being willing to do the things that we do, such as deliver to 50 million people in this country that don't live in dense urban areas, but we deliver to them just the same every single day. That this is not about efficiency at the Postal Service. This is moving it under the Department of the Commerce is 100% designed to do exactly what I've talked about here, and make more money for the private companies, and eventually start at what would likely be a fairly rapid death spiral for us that would cost the jobs of letter carriers and other postal employees and have a significant impact on the people that we serve and count on us every day.
Okay, so what have we as the NALC done so far?
Yeah, a lot of things. This is an extensive campaign. We, of course, when we heard about this on Thursday, immediately began reaching out to a lot of those that could influence the administration. That includes some Republican members of Congress. It includes some other folks. On Friday of last week, we, a lot of our members placed calls to the office of the Speaker of the House. That was designed so that the Speaker would his folks would very clearly understand that this is a bad idea, and maybe most importantly, that the people of America don't support this, because no matter who somebody voted for, no matter what their political persuasion is, whether we're talking about the members of the NALC or the general public, what they did not vote for is to destroy the Postal Service. On Monday here in D.C., we had a large rally that was great. We had hundreds of NALC members and our brothers and sisters from other postal unions and other unions, our brothers and sisters throughout the labor movement, really, and veterans groups. And there are a lot of different communities represented there. A hell no rally, we called it, because that's our answer to this proposal. Is all that type stuff is designed to educate the public, to raise awareness. So when we get media coverage of things like that, it's really designed to just let the people know what is going on. And as we go forward, but by the time you listen to this, you have likely seen that we are going to have a national day of action on March the 23rd, where a number of our branches all around the country are going to hold similar events and get our local media and those outlets out. I'm sure doing this all around the country will have, some national media coverage as well, which is again designed just to get the word out and let people know, because again, it doesn't matter where they are, it really doesn't matter who they are. The vast majority of Americans support us. There's a lot of things that we are doing from sort of a digital and ad campaign perspective. Many of those are targeted. They're targeted at certain locations and people that live in certain congressional districts, are designed to influence specific members of Congress. In a lot of cases, our state associations and branches in those locations are involved in that. You're not going to see a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill and elsewhere um, talk about this publicly because, frankly, they are afraid of this administration. But that doesn't mean that behind the scenes, that they're not communicating. So there's a piece of this that's designed, to influence them. So I would say that as we go forward, just pay attention to our social platforms and the website. We did just this week a day of action where we sent messages directly to the White House because that's where this battle is. This is not something that's being contemplated in Congress. This is not something that Congress is ultimately, it's highly unlikely that we'll have any desire or realistic attempt to make such a change in Congress. Our congressional outreach is really about co-sponsoring our legislation that we've mentioned here, but there's a multi-pronged approach going forward. And just more generally, I want to make a point that I think is really important. This is not the type of fight that's going to be over with next week or the week after that or the week after that. This is going to continue. Um, whether it's a different approach to the administration potentially trying to get to the same end through a piecemeal effort or some other way, this is going to continue, which means that we have to be in a position to sustain everything that we've done the last week plus. And look, we as a union have the most active membership. We have a tremendous amount of influence on Capitol Hill. Here in Washington, D.C., our union is stronger than it has ever been on Capitol Hill. It's frankly not even close. But in order for us to maximize our strengths of what we do in D.C., what we do out in the field, we have to have all of our members together pushing toward the same objective. And I promise you all, I assure you, there is a strategy behind everything that we ask our members to do. This is a fight where we do not have the luxury of veering off course, of thinking about, anyone's individual, all ideas are welcome to be shared, but someone kind of going in a different direction with, members of Congress and things like that. This is us together. And as we move forward, there's going to be plenty of opportunities beginning with that day of action. On that day of action, reach out to your National Business Agent's office if you haven't done that already, and we'll get you set up with everything you need in terms of materials and the kit for the press. We'll assist you with the media. We'll assist you with how to talk to the media and how to have a successful event and get the word out. But I cannot say this strongly enough. This is going to sustain. This is something that this fight will sustain, so we have to sustain. And it's going to take all of us together. This is not a time, if you have differences with somebody at the local level in your station or in your branch, this is the time to put those differences to the side and understand that, our strength as a union is our members. It's our solidarity. And on this fight, we have to be together and we have to all be pushing in the same direction.
That's well said. We really have to stick together on this one. Can you just talk about our grassroots system, like for people that might not know that it's their first time hearing the podcast because someone on the workroom floor said, "Hey, you should listen to this." Can you just talk about like what our system is here at the NALC and how we deal with our members of Congress?
Yeah, no, Eddie, really good question. People that learn about all these things that we do are, both our members and otherwise are typically pretty amazed. So it's a combination of, activity that happens here in DC and then of course our structure, which provides for this, and the activism of our members. So let me just start with what we do here in DC. We employ a number of lobbyists, professionals that are very well respected, experienced on Capitol Hill, work on both sides of the aisle with Republicans and Democrats. Um, Structurally, we as a union, our state associations are their real reason for existence is to advance our legislative agenda here on Capitol Hill in those states. And many of them we see here throughout, particularly throughout the spring. And, when there's a particular member of Congress that we need to move on an issue, such as what I talked about when we first heard about this, that's going to involve getting our people at the state level. We have letter carrier congressional liaisons in every single congressional district. We've got a member there that's, been trained and designated to deal with them. And then, of course, our branches that develop relationships with their members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. So it ranges really from the things that we do here at the headquarters level, dealing directly with the Congress, with the White House, with other parts of the federal government, and what our state associations and LICLs, our letter carrier congressional liaisons, and then, of course, the branches do locally. And all that is fueled by the Letter Care Political Fund. This is our political action committee. It's our PAC. Compared to a lot of PACs that exist in the cesspool that is campaign finance in this country, our PAC is righteous. It's not corporate billionaires dumping money into trying to buy elections. It's really emblematic of what solidarity is, and frankly, one of the principles that unions are founded on. And that is that our PAC is a little bit from a lot of our members that help us grow our collective influence. So, you hear us talking about these threats today. If there's someone were to ask me, what's the simplest thing that you could do to do your part, or what you could do to protect your own given these battles? And the answer to that question would be to contribute $5 or $10 every paycheck to the Letter Care Political Fund. It's bipartisan. We give money to Republicans, we give money to Democrats, we give money to people that support us. And as we go through these battles, it is more important than ever that everybody participates in that so that we together can grow our collective influence.
If I could just take a sec, just talking to our members, that might not like to get political here, like this is our livelihood. And when the messaging comes down, it's going to be hell no. And you might not like who you're going to have to reach out to. You might not like that representative that we're asking you to reach out to, but we have to be just like we're out on our route. We might not love all our customers, but it's going to have to be a hell no and not go to hell. Right? We got to be respectful when we reach out to our members of Congress. I know we're upset and we're angry, but we're going to need everybody on our side on this.
Yeah, Ed, if I could just, I think that's an excellent point. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking to myself, years and years ago when I was a really young letter carrier, I got involved in the union and because I liked representing letter carriers and I hated bullies. And, then as I did more and more, I loved route adjustments and I loved Article 12 and all these nerdy things. I didn't, get involved in this stuff because I liked politics and I liked legislation. And to be very honest about it, I still don't, outside of, obviously the things that affect letter carriers. But the point is that regardless of political affiliation, these type of attacks have to be fought with money. That's the way it works in this country. So Ed, I just wanted to reemphasize what you said that, even if someone holds the opinion that we shouldn't even have to be involved in politics. The fact of the matter is we have to, because if we're not and we don't do the best that we can do, that is going to result in losing and our jobs being hurt. And that's not what we as a union do. We win, and it takes all of us to win.
Great. Do you just want to leave us with any other messages to the membership about this Fight Like Hell campaign?
Yeah, we will, of course, keep you updated on the bargaining and anything else that's happening here. I guess just reemphasize the importance of understanding that this is going to be an ongoing fight. And It's going to continue throughout this year, probably into 2026. We can win, but for us to win, once again, we have to all be together. We have to all be with getting the right message to the right people at the right time as part of a cohesive strategy that we've talked about here. We have an extensive structure of people from our headquarters staff and our legislative and political organizers that are out there. If you have a question or you want to get involved, you should reach out to your branch, reach out to your state. You can, of course, call your national business agent's office. But it's important that we all understand this so that, we can all take whatever collective action is needed on the day. Because the more voices that say the same thing and direct that in the right direction, the louder we are. And the louder we are, the more that we're heard. So I appreciate everybody that's, really stepped up over the last week plus. The response has been fabulous to some of the calls to action, but it's very important that we continue to do that and talk to your coworkers and talk to your, other letter carriers and members about, they really should keep up with what's going on here. And my commitment is that, we here from headquarters are going to continue to keep you informed and give you those opportunities to all jump in together to ensure that we achieve the things we need to achieve and we say hell no to the attacks.
Well, Bry, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you. I appreciate all our members out there listening and fighting every day. And I just want to thank you all for listening to this episode of the Fight Like Hell podcast. Please subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And we need you to share this podcast with all of our NALC brothers and sisters. You have to follow the NALC on all social media. Now's the time, either on Facebook, X, Twitter, Instagram, and you can find the links to our accounts in the episode description. May your steward be by your side, and may your union have your back. Thanks for listening, and let's fight like hell.